Yeah, it was really great to connect and meet you.
You too.
All right. Thanks so much, Jen and Jennifer. That was an awesome conversation to listen to. So I really appreciate you both coming on and sharing with us. We're going to go ahead now and keep the day of conversation going. I'm going to go ahead and get John and Brian pulled up here. All right. Hey, guys. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Doing good. First of all, everybody out there, you don't need to adjust your screen. There really are 3 men talking about eating disorders right now. So it's something that we need to be talking about more. I've shared it time and time again, but I have battled an eating disorder myself. So it's very important that we get out there and break through the stigmas and the stereotypes so that men can get the help that they need when it comes to eating disorders, but also just mental health in general. So I will go ahead and let both of you introduce yourselves. John, you're up on my screen first, so I'll let you take it away.
My name is John Ogrodnichuk. I'm a professor of psychiatry at the University of British Columbia and the director of the UBC psychotherapy program. And relatedly to our conversation, I also founded the men's mental health resource Heads Up Guys.
Awesome. Yeah, and Heads Up Guys is actually one of the first places where I shared my story. So it's really cool to have you joining us today, because it was the first place where I'm like, hey, guys can talk about this stuff and it's okay. So yeah, thank you for the organization. And Brian, would you like to go ahead and introduce
yourself? I just want to say Heads Up Guys is a wonderful organization, and I've been there many times looking through all of your site and all of your work, it's so nice to be able to be here with you as well, John.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Pollock. At all times, I have a bubble connected to my head saying eating disorders in men. And I'm also a professor at Yeshiva University in Manhattan. I teach eating disorders, clinical applications, as well as diagnostic tools. And I own a company called Hilltop Behavioral Health in northern New Jersey, where we serve men and women. I'd say we're one of the few outpatient centers that serves about 50% of our clientele is males. I've also previously was on the board of the National Association for Males with Eating Disorders, and I advocate quite a lot. I used to have a TV show in Pennsylvania called Minding Men that can start up at any time, but at this time I'm a little on hiatus as we continue to grow here at Hilltop.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Brian. And it's some of your videos too that were also very beneficial to me in my recovery journey. And I got to give a shout out to Hilltop today for helping sponsor this event and making this day a conversation possible. So thank you so much for that. We'll go ahead and just dive right in. I kind of talked about it here at the top, but there's such a stereotype that eating disorders only happen to young, skinny females usually. Men aren't even part of the conversation. So I'm curious, in both of your works, what are you seeing in terms of men battling eating disorders right now?
John, you go first.
Okay. Well, the guys that I'm exposed to a lot, being on the campus of UBC, we're a huge institution. We have about 60,000 students, and so a lot of young guys on campus. And it's really interesting with this cohort. Here are young adults. They're going through a really important transition in life, becoming independent adults. Discovering their sense of self in so many ways, their identity, who am I, where am I going in life, what am I doing, relationships, and discovering, what it's like to be in relationships, what kind of relationships, their own sense of self as far as sexual identity even. And a lot of people are, a lot of guys are in this space is like, I don't really know what I am, or a sense of self about who I am. I'm here because that's what I was told I was supposed to do, either by parents, teachers, society, and they're a little bit in a lost space, and in a really important space that they a lot of them struggle with is with regard to relationships. And it's like, how do I position myself to stand out from the crowd in a way and attract a partner. And that's one of the ways. So lots of guys go to the gyms, they're always working out, and to the point it becomes not a good thing. But the ones that I see in my practice, it's something very different. And it's uh, sort of a ubiquitous kind of issue that a lot of the guys that I see, it's this sense of not being good enough, my not good enough self. And disordered eating can be reflective of that in different ways. One, where they kind of punish that not good enough self, but through deprivation. And it's like, I'm not going to eat. I don't deserve to nourish myself. I'm not good enough for that. And they're really harsh on themselves. The way I look at, and they can be very, very thin. And I know you guys see this more than I do, I'm sure. And it's like they're never good enough. I'm always, there's too much here, too much there, and they have to deprive themselves. And somehow they have this idealized picture in their mind of what they need to be in order to be good enough. And it can go in the other way too, where it's these young guys going to the gym, they're always working out, they're trying different ways to create, in a way, what I called it, their armor. This is going to protect, this is going to protect me. No one will be able to see the real me. This is my shield. And the bigger I get, the tougher I look, it keeps people at a distance. They can't really see the real me. But again, it's insatiable. What will be good enough? There is no good enough. And so it's just that they become addicted, if you will, to the gym, getting more buff, looking more tough, as a way to project this image that they're strong and capable, but inside really hiding that sense of self, that they're fundamentally flawed in some way.
And 1,000,000%, I'm just going to jump on top of that and say, yes, you just spoke everything that's true. And we see that all the time. The thing I think that's so interesting on that not good enough and the need to always sculpt ourselves and create a sense of balance within, let's say, the homogeneous stereotype of being a man in our current society, which is not creative, not weak, never vulnerable, strong, lean, smart, leader. Think about the words the kids are using nowadays: alpha, sigma, riz. Those are masculine words. Those are masculine contexts. And if you're not within those, and mind you, everyone's using them, I don't have enough riz. I'll say it right now. And the fact is, when you're looking at all this, right? I have a kid. He talks about this all the time. He tells me to stop. He yells at me all the time. But the cultural context of where this is coming from, I hate to say it, it's a monster. It's very hard to stop it. And so to change that culture completely, particularly in our current political and universal climate, is going to be quite hard. So we're seeing these experiences where people are trying to live in contexts where they're being policed by other men, right? So if you aren't good enough, you are kicked out of the tribe. If you are seen as weak or you're not smart enough, you are kicked out of the tribe of manhood. If you are not sporty enough, going back to, I don't know, kindergarten, first, second grade, you are not part of the tribe. And so there's this constant need to always not only be policed, but be policing ourselves within these contexts of what safety is and masculinity is, which includes body. It all gets projected onto body, as well, of course, with mental health, which is the perfect storm paradigm that we're talking about here. So when you trigger all of this, particularly with nutrition or lack thereof, it turns into a storm. So there's a lot I could say. I think that what John is saying is very right. We are seeing contexts of young boys with selectivism to a point where they just want to be lean and very, very thin, binging on proteins and working out all day, to even just more sensory issues. Now we're seeing a lot more ARFID, right, where people are selective, and we're seeing it now more and more with the adult population. But where this stuff really starts to show is in transitions. We're seeing it in elementary to middle school, into high school, into college. Each transition seems to bring about a loss of sense of safety, which then all of a sudden creates a need to make sure that we do not offend the policing. And it only gets worse.
Such a critical issue that you brought up, that sense of wanting to be accepted, finding your tribe. And that's a fundamental human need. Human beings are social animals. We want that connection. We need that connection. And so appropriate what you said, those times of transition, we're looking to be accepted, to find our place within a group, and feeling the pressures of conformity to what we need to do and be to belong.
Yeah, absolutely. And those were all things that really resonated with me in my personal experience. I often share the story of when I was in 2nd grade and I was stung by a bee on the elementary school playground. And I wouldn't tell anybody because I didn't want to come across as a crybaby or have that man card revoked or any of that. Already at 2nd grade, that mentality was in my mind, and I was thinking that the other boys would pick on me then, or I would be kicked out and I wouldn't belong. I wouldn't be good enough. And already the seeds were just planted, at that young age, and they only get worse as we get older and more things are kind of compounded onto it. So how do we get across to boys and to men? How are we able to break through some of that stigma and be there to support them or to help them get the resources that they need? Because oftentimes we talk about the guys going to the gym all the time. They probably get the same response I gave. I'm doing the right thing. I'm being healthy. This is what you're supposed to do. But unfortunately, it gets to a point where it's not healthy any longer. So how do we break through to them?
Brian, you want to take that? Yeah.
I'll start with it. How about that? You take the next part. I think that's one of the hardest, most difficult things. That's why John has his organization, Heads Up Guys. That's why I had the Minding Men's component. I have found it's not even okay to outreach men because it's a problem if they're seen talking to somebody like us. So you don't want to go to the dark corners of the world because that's not what you do. So where do you find it? I think you actually have to be a trailblazer and push back and just say, I'm willing to talk and I'm willing to challenge this. We're seeing more and more guys calling because we have male clinicians. That's important. Guys, speaking to guys, and sometimes we open up to women, sometimes we open up to men, and it's very hard to have guys who represent what it is to go through this struggle or to speak to the pain and the suffering and the safety seeking of something mental health wise. These other companies have tried doing this with, Michael Phelps and other people, and that's on such a mass scale. They're not really getting to the nitty gritty of eating disorders. There's also other things like the LGBTQIA community that probably has more access to having these conversations and getting into more of those communities. That's absolutely possible. There was one other piece I wanted to mention, and I'm losing it, so that sucks. But the idea of being able to offer the support, I know what it was. It's linguistics. This is one of my things I'm starting to research now, and it's really hard to find. The problem is also in therapy. No guy wants to go to therapy that's dealing with masculinity concerns or who am I concerns, and I need strength concerns, that wants to go into a room and somebody goes, how are you feeling today? Were you sad? No guy wants that, right? So we have to have a new language. And it's hard. There's not a lot of linguists out there in the world, but the language of therapy to help men is too feminine. So we need something. That's why when I talked about men at the gym, they're sculpting. There's a reason. It puts them in control. Men don't talk about bulimia. Why? Or binging. Why? Because if they lose control, they are seen as not acceptable and policed and weak. So men don't lose control. So we need to find words in linguistics that actually can reach these guys in a therapeutic way that allows them to be able to enter the room.
So many great things you touched upon, Brian. Fantastic. It's so interesting. 2 days ago, I was doing a podcast with a mental health podcast in Ukraine, and lots of stuff going on there. A lot of guys coming back from the battlefield in not a great place, and they're wondering, how do you connect with men, especially these kinds of men? And one of the big things we talked about was language, and it's like, and what you said was music to my ears. It's exactly the same thing that I talk about. You need to be real with guys. They need trust in order to open up, and our language is one of the critical ways that we create trust. They need to feel resonance with us. They need to understand that we get them even through language, and being able to just be authentic with them and just use normal everyday language. And I say, I I use the word shit a lot in therapy. It's probably the most versatile word in the English language, especially when it comes to guys. And you just go with it. And if a guy is starting to open up and he's sharing something and might be shameful of it, and it's like, man, that really sucks that you had to go through that. And it's like, oh, you get me, you understand me. The last thing any therapist will want to do is to push off their client, their patient, with language that doesn't connect with them. And if you get a guy who's coming in, sitting down, and you say, tell me how you feel, use a really low tone and almost um tentative, it's like, it's going to put them off. It's going to give them an impression that you really don't get them right now. This doesn't connect with me. The control piece that you said, and I put it in their court, and I said, this is going to be tough. It's probably going to be the toughest thing you've ever had to do, but don't worry, we're in this together, we can do it. But you're the captain of the ship. I'm not going to tell you what you must do. I'm not going to tell you how to be. I'll be with you through this, but you really take whatever we do here, and this is your show to own.
Yeah, they need that control.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Throughout my recovery, it was very important that I felt empowered the entire time. And my therapist did a great job of working with me on that. And it was so crucial too, because he got to know who I was. We would go in there sometimes in the first half an hour of a session, we'd be talking about sports or my hobbies or my interests, and we wouldn't even talk about anything eating disorder specific, because he was establishing that trust with me and helping me feel empowered in the conversations. And that's kind of how I lead our men's peer support group here at ANAD now. Is I've got to be very gentle, because if somebody's brand new to the group and has never attended before, if you set in with the how are you feeling tonight, or let's open up and talk about our emotions, they're going to keep that camera off and they're never going to come back again. But if we just let them kind of dip their toe in that first time and get to see that this is a safe space where we can all share and talk and support each other, they're more likely to come back for future meetings. And eventually they go from having their camera off to, leading the conversation. So it's really cool to see that progression, but it's definitely something, especially with men, that you can't force. You've got to let them kind of have that control and be able to navigate the conversation and the journey together.
Another thing that, picking up what you touched upon a couple times, Brian, is oh, see, I lost my thought. Welcome to the club, by the way.
Part of it, right?
Forgetting, yeah.
It is.
but it's when you're working with men and men working with men, there is that aspect of being given permission by another man to share, to be authentic. I like using the word authentic rather than vulnerable, because for a lot of guys, it has a connotation of weakness that's just too much for them to even use that word. But often when we're using that word, we're just talking about being real and just being your real authentic self. And so when and it's not like every guy needs another guy, but a lot of them do want to work with another man. And I think that particular working context does give the opportunity to be with another man and say, hey, dude, it's okay to feel this way. It's all right. And it's like, really? I can share this kind of stuff and it's all right. I'm not going to be shamed. I'm not going to be rejected, ridiculed, or whatever. And that permission is so important. It really is.
Yeah, it's everything, and it takes time to get there. I found there's some wonderful quintessential work done by a gentleman out in Yukon, Mahalik, and can't remember his last name, the gentleman at Yukon, around men gender stereotypes and roles. And there's one piece that therapists really push back against that speak to this a lot, which is the idea of men connecting with men. For a lot of people, that's not acceptable. Men are not even taught that. So how do we as clinicians and how do we as patients or clients or men seeking help without even being able to verbalize it, actually make that match and that connection? And there's rules to it, and it's weird. We run a group here at Hilltop. We run a free male eating disorder, actually just a free men's group. It's not even eating disorders, just free men's mental health group since June of 2021 for free. It has never been canceled. It's been going on for almost 4.5 years now. And it's been wonderful because the guys in there get it. And we have found that we have to poke fun at male stereotypes a little bit sometimes, where it's always run by two clinicians. So I'll make a joke about the other clinician and he'll throw one back at me, or somebody I already know will make a joke that's very nice. And then we learn that repartee, and men open up differently. Sometimes they need, depending on the guy, they need to poke fun because that's how they've been taught to deal with being connected and accepted. Then you can build and break down those curtains and barriers that are in the way and build it. But there's always this like unsettled, weird first 5 to 10 minutes where everybody's trying to figure out how to communicate and get it, because there's a language and a lack of connection and a lack of openness, and the authenticity is there, but how do you keep it in the room? We have to make jokes. We have to say stupid things about ourselves. It's what we do. It's what we've been taught. And I don't think therapists particularly know how to do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes I'll say, "Oh, here, this is how we'll go," because dudes don't talk face to face
Right.
when we're talking.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
but yeah, you're absolutely right. I think most guys recognize some of the ridiculousness in, the things that we do to be a man. We know on the one part, this is kind of what you do to be part of the club. We were talking about that earlier, but how it keeps us from developing the kind of relationships that we really want.
Mm-hmm. Even particularly at home, right? How many of us had, and our parents are wonderful, but how many of us have had a different type of role model than what seems to be what we want nowadays, right? Our parents were under different duress and different stress back in the days, different ways of parenting. For goodness sake, they didn't have to be on top of us. In fact, they had to be reminded that we were even around at 10 o'clock at night. So there's a piece of this where the intensity of how we connect at home requires more authenticity than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, getting back to your point about sort of the masculine norms that we need to conform to, it's really important in therapy and beyond, of course, to think about not masculinity as a singular entity with these very well-defined, circumscribed proscriptions and prescriptions, but think of it in more of a plural way, is that I can feel like a man. I can feel masculine in different ways in different situations. Sometimes it might align with more that traditional where I'm feeling I'm taking a strong stand on something, taking control, being perhaps stoic about some things because that's what the situation calls for. And then other times being very tender and empathic and compassionate, but still feeling that I'm being very much a man in this situation because it aligns with my sense of self as a man, that I like to care for people in my life.
Yeah.
And that's the way I show care. That's the way I can feel manly.
And I love that. And it's so real. And imagine the fact of not allowing ourselves to access that just that diatribe you just mentioned can be the cause of anxiety and depression and triggering trauma and bipolar disorder and other underlying things. Forget about the eating disorder. There's other stuff going on too, right? And it's literally the lack of being able to connect or be that kind of person that's actually, we're seeing the symptom as anxiety and depression and everything due to the constriction.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, when one of the first presentations I gave, one of the questions they asked me was, how do I feel about toxic masculinity? And I responded back that we define toxic masculinity when we start to apply these stereotypes to each other. If we take that more plural view of the term, we realize that each one of us is masculine in our own ways. There is nothing set in stone that says you have to follow X, Y, and Z in order to be masculine or to be a man. And it's when we start to try to put men into these little boxes, that's when it can become toxic. But for some guys, they're just going to be a little bit more stoic. They're going to be a little bit more reserved. That's just naturally who they are. For other men, they might wear their heart on their sleeve and be a little bit more emotional and speak up. That's just that we're all human. We're all different. So you can't apply one term and just expect that it's going to apply to 50% of the population.
Well said, Jason. And you know, I personally despise the term toxic masculinity because it implies that there's something inherently wrong with masculinity. It's the fact that really what we're talking about is that for some guys, they can kind of be on the extreme end of the continuum with some aspects of masculinity that are maladaptive for themselves or others. But it doesn't mean that masculinity has some toxic element to it. And it's like underneath those behaviors that we're pointing out and saying that's toxic, there's a lot of pain and hurt there. It's just unfortunately the way it's coming out is not good for them or perhaps the people that are around them. But there's some real pain there.
Yeah, big pain, a ridiculous amount of pain. And mind you, regarding the experience of body image connected to all this, to keep it in the eating disorder vein and the real pain, body image is really just a context of which people feel the authority to place their own judgments onto other people in order to feel different and safe in their own worlds. So when you look at stigma, racism, prejudice, body shaming, when you look at all kinds of different subjugations that people create in their minds to make them feel better in the world, which is an automatic, actual psychological thing we do. It's nothing we can stop, but we have to be aware of. It's something that actually, that's where body image is coming from. It's the fear that people are actually continuing to create further judgments on our body that are in a patterned way that make us pinpointed into a certain aspect we do not like.
And the terrible pain that emerges from that, you know, that's
that's everything.
Yeah. And we could just keep this conversation going. This has been amazing to have the opportunity to chat with both of you today. And I hope it's only the start of these types of conversations. I'd love to have you back on and we just keep this thing going. You know, we could turn it into a series here. But John, would you like to go ahead and just share a little bit more about Heads Up Guys before we wrap up here and see if anybody wants to get involved or share their
well,
story?
thanks for that. Yeah, headsupguys.org. It's an online men's mental health resource. There's a lifetime of information on there about how to help oneself or help somebody in your life who might be struggling. We have lots of tools and courses on there, self-help information, talk about control. And it's like rather than fight guys' sense of self-reliance as an aspect of their masculinity, let's use it. Like, let's teach them how to be their best selves. And we have a therapist directory. We have over 1,500 therapists that are part of this therapist directory. So if you come to the site and you say, you know, I want to start working with somebody, we have the conduit to help connect people with that help.
It's awesome.
Excellent. Yeah, well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And like I said, it was a great resource for me at the start of my recovery. And Brian, if people want to attend that support group, if men out there want to attend that support group or get connected with Hilltop, how
We're
can
just
they
at
do that?
hilltopbehavioralhealth.com. Pretty simple. We also have a link within that. We have something called the Center for Men. So there's actually specific sections that are outlined for men. We're there. I mean, you'll find us. We're the largest eating disorder outpatient center in the state of New Jersey right now. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing, and I'm sure some of your recordings are still floating out there from the show.
I got to
before,
get back.
so.
Anybody want to join me? I need a co-host.
Hey,
there you go, Jason. That's your call.
all right. Well, thank you both, John and Brian, for joining me today and for being a part of the conversation. And I look forward to talking to you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. I appreciate you putting this together, and thanks for everything that you do, Brian. It was awesome to meet you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Keep going.